All right, Riles, I'm going to go on a rant, but I want to hear your perspective on this. Driving pet peeve. I think you've done a lot of driving in your day, and I have as well. I need to know what's your driving pet peeve.
Oh man, I think it depends on like the mood I'm in. Like if I'm like I have like a weird thing of like I like judge someone's character based off their driving habits. Like it probably doesn't make sense, but it kind of makes sense to me. Like someone who's just willing to like tailgate you or kind of like weave in and out of traffic. Like they have like some sort of they're a little bit like they're absent minded towards other people's like feelings. I get like so deep with it. I get really easily like pissed off, but I mean, I'm not going to do anything. I also too, though, like know that like sometimes I can be a little aggressive, but then I also think like, why? Like you don't get places quicker, you know?
No,
Like if you just
no.
drive the speed limit, you're like, whatever, if you kind of pass people when you need to, but you're not going to get there maybe like a minute or two quicker than the guy trying to weave in and out of traffic. So
Y-
I don't know. That's my take.
I do love
Can I
that
can
take.
I hear yours? I feel like you're excited to bring this up, so I feel like you got something in the
Okay,
arsenal.
so moved to Calgary a year and a half ago. There's one main road through this whole city, Deerfoot. It goes through the whole city, and there's quite a few merging lanes. Now, I can't tell you how many times in my life, in these past little bit, I have literally yelled in my vehicle, jokingly with my girlfriend, that everybody in this world needs to take a gosh darn merging course because it blows my mind that people think that it's okay to drive 70 or 80 in the merging lane getting onto a 110 highway. What what is the thought process? And it just I can't tell you how much it absolutely boils my blood, man. Like grinds my gears. Like if I'm and the problem is like you just said though, like if I'm behind somebody that's merging really slow and then like I get off at like a turn and then I see them right behind me because I blow by them, I'm like realistically like I didn't need to blow by anybody. Like they're getting to the same place at the same time. But yes, merging, man. Oh, like it is that's it for me.
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's one of those things that really just tests your patience. Where like sometimes you have to step back and be like, okay, really wasn't a big deal. I have one friend. I'm gonna give him. I'm not gonna say his name, but I think he probably knows if he were to listen. Like he's gotten in full blown like ready to get out of the car, like square up with a guy or like just it's so funny thinking about it too, because he just like I could just picture him doing it, but I'm never gonna get to that extent.
I will never get to that extent, but it's funny little side note. I work at a golf course and I was closing the other night and all of a sudden this guy comes in with a bloody eye and I was like, what's going on? He's like, yeah, me and another guy got in a fist fight on between 9 and 10 fairway. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, like I'm totally fine, but like we were arguing about like which ball was whose, and like all of a sudden he started swinging, and I was like, that is so aggressive for a
Yeah,
golf course.
that's sad. That's
Yeah,
sad. Like even like when I see videos of like people fighting in the stands of hockey games or sporting events,
like why?
like the players out there don't even. I don't want to say they don't even care that much, but like they're not willing to do that. Maybe like in hockey, yeah, but like usually like you're willing to sacrifice your life to for what?
Like
For
for
you
watching
know?
your sports team.
Yeah. So,
But
anyways,
anyways, we had the absolute pleasure of having one of my favorite people in this world on, Chris Johnston. Chris Johnston is a longtime sports journalist. Has was with Sportsnet, Hockey Night Canada. And I guess I completely forgot the intro, but my name is Tyler Smith, and this is my boy Riles. And this is all powered by TorchPro. This is the Speak Your Mind podcast. But anyways, Chris Johnston, I can't tell you enough amazing things about this man. He grew up in Cobourg, Ontario, and from pretty much, I think, the moment he was fresh out of the womb, he wanted to be a sports journalist. And it's incredible to see what he's done for the game, and it's incredible to see the fact that he really does care about the human side of hockey as well. And I think we had a very candid conversation about grief, perspective, hockey, the job aspect of it, and yeah, I mean, I honestly just really enjoyed this because I love CJ. But what did you think?
yeah, no, it was great. It's nice knowing that someone like that is kind of spearheading the media part of our game. And I know as a player, it's easy to just look at the media and think they're kind of in it for themselves or ready to expose guys and things like that. But you could tell he's got a really good heart, and he's done so much good for the game in his career. So yeah, it was great. It's got a great story, and it's amazing how much you have in common as a player as you do with a guy in the media when he talks about the grind and how it's his dream, but there's still some parts that he's got to adjust to and things like that. So it was a great convo.
Yeah, he's one of the most genuine out there. But before we dive into today's interview, we wanted to highlight that Premier Blue Cross is a proud sponsor of Speak Your Mind. 1 in 5 people deal with mental health conditions every year. So no matter who you are, it's okay to ask for help. Premier Blue Cross, always in your corner. Now let's jump into the conversation. CJ, it's a pleasure to have you on. I know even on the phone call the other day, I could sit and chat with you, whether it's about hockey, whether it's about life. I think we could sit and chat for, half hour to an hour easy. So it's a pleasure to have you on. What's going on a Sunday right now? Are you watching football in Toronto? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, it's been a good sports day on my couch prior to this call. Watch some of the Blue Jays game. I'm a big Jays fan, and we're getting to the end of the regular season, and then monitoring my fantasy football team. So it's let's face it, Sundays are for relaxing, at least for those of us that don't play in the NHL. So that's a good day for me to be chilling out.
A Sunday day off is a dream. We have one today, so I'm kind of doing the same thing as you. But to get your Sunday in where you can lay around and watch football, my wife had a baby shower or something to go to, so I had some quiet time too. It's a dream.
That is the dream. You're living the dream, Riley.
Yeah. How are the Jays? What's going on with the Jays? How do you obviously I know, but like, what do you see in the Jays come postseason?
I'm like an irrational fan of the Blue Jays. Like it's funny. Like with hockey, I'm sort of paid to try to look at things as calmly as possible. Like I'm just a crazy baseball fan. So I'm really hoping they host the wild card. We're just down to the end of the regular season here. I got tickets for one of the games next weekend, and with the way the playoffs work, they only one team gets to host games in that wild card round. So I hope I actually get to go. They've got it together though in September. I was kind of worried about them through the summer. It felt like either the bats weren't going or the pitching was off, but I'm sort of mildly optimistic they could go on a run here, and I'd love to get in the building for a game. Probably one of the best sporting events I ever went at. I was just in the crowd for the bat flip game, Jose Bautista, 7 years ago. And honestly, even for all the stuff I get to do professionally, and I've been to the Olympics and the Cup final every year, like that might be one of my favorite moments at a sporting event. And so, I'm not saying we'll replicate that this coming week, but I love the atmosphere around playoffs and sports. I mean, to me, that's the best.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's perfect. Okay, we're going to dive into this foundation. Growing up in Cobourg, you talk about how much you just love sports in general. I think obviously hockey's up there, baseball's up there, Cowboys football's up there a little bit for you. Talk about your roots, and was it a case of you were waking up on Saturdays and Sundays watching hockey, watching baseball, watching football? Like, was that kind of the routine in your household, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I was obsessive about basically all the sports. I love golf too. If you go back to when I was a really young kid, I was playing the sports, but even when we didn't have games, Tyler, I'm a little older than you. I'm older than Riley too. I'm talking pre-internet era here. Literally kids just went out in the street and played every day. And so I was playing road hockey or, baseball in my backyard. I had a pretty big backyard as a kid. I was collecting cards. I just was obsessed with everything I could get, with the NHL in particular, but even the other sports. And, it was, again, it's almost hard. I don't know what your demographic is, your listeners, but it's hard to remember. Like, this was a time when you couldn't just see every game. You certainly couldn't see every highlight. And so you almost had to seek it out a little bit. I grew up about an hour from Toronto, so Maple Leafs games were obviously available on TV. But, if someone did something cool in like a Dallas Stars game, I probably wasn't going to see it. And so I kind of went to every length I could to consume the NHL. I had a strange brain for memorizing stats. It's almost a waste of time, but at that era, my uncle once took me to a bar, like way before I was drinking age. And all his buddies were there just like quizzing me, and they couldn't believe how much I knew. So yeah, for me, honestly, sports were a crazy passion from a young age. And oddly, I kind of knew for whatever reason, like before anyone should even make this decision, I wasn't going to play pro sports. And I always sort of had wanted to be around the game in some way I can. And I think in a lot of ways that paved the way to the career I've had.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you ever like find yourself, you're so obviously invested in hockey. Is there a part of you that kind of would want to creep into other sports? I know you're kind of strictly focused on hockey, but like it's gotta like maybe be of interest, like to talk about something else and kind of do your job in another way when it comes to other sports, or is that not the case?
Well, I'm of two minds about it, Riley. Like, you would probably know this, I'm guessing, as a player, and I still love hockey, don't get me wrong, but your love for it changes when it's your job.
Yeah.
And so in a weird way, even though I love these other sports just as a fan, I kind of appreciate still being able to be a fan. You know, the what if question I always ask myself is that, what if tomorrow I just was never a hockey journalist again? I just didn't work in hockey. Would I be able to sort of rekindle fandom or like it? And I honestly don't think I could. I mean, I'll always love the sport. I love the people in the sport. I'm so grateful for the relationships I've built, because I think there's so many great people in our sport. But, you know, part of being a sports fan to me is there's a bit of mystique, right? Like, it's, you almost like there's something magical about it. And, you know, the truth of the matter is, when you get to interact with it the way I do, like, you get to know, you sort of, you see the people behind it. I mean, I don't look at the logos and have these dancing thoughts. You know, I think, oh, this guy's kind of a jerk, or I really like this guy. I'm happy to, you know, like every year when a team wins the Stanley Cup, there's usually a guy or two I've at least, you know, had a good interactions with over my career. And I'm just happy, you know, because to see them have success. And so I just can't imagine being a fan in hockey. And so that informs me thinking, like, yeah, I don't actually want to go cover the NFL if I could, or, you know, the other sports, because I still like them sort of. I still enjoy sitting on a Sunday like today and just watching like everyone else. And so, you know, I don't really have that desire. I've covered a fair bit of golf earlier in my career, and I really like that. You know, it's interesting because golfers basically are out there alone. Obviously they have a caddy, but they're sort of, they don't have a team to be concerned of. And so I found golfers always were very honest with what they were experiencing in terms of when I interviewed them. Yeah. Because I don't think that they have to be as worried about how what they say could be interpreted, or, you know, they can just say like, I screwed this up, or I did something great. And so I like that dynamic, dealing with them. But as I say, I think it's hockey or bust for me at this point.
Yeah.
And so, like, even with that, like, I mean, I think it's probably pretty valuable for you to have that balance of like not being too invested into like just hockey, but also like having an investment in like the players as well. Like, I think we've talked about it a little bit before maybe, but like how valuable has it been to like develop these relationships with these players and then also like see their success? Like, is it like, how do you even kind of describe that from your perspective?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, like, I'm not the right guy to watch, you know, the Sabres game today and try to break down their power play the way like a coach could or a player could. I mean, really for me, I'm most interested in stories and people, and, you know, that's how I've always approached my job. There are some people that do the kind of work I do that can really, you know, give critical analysis on the way a team's playing or deploying their players. That's not my strength. I mean, this is why, and I'm sure we'll get into this to some degree, but one of the things I've really struggled with during the pandemic is, you know, not being able to go and talk to someone face to face, you know, when you do the job the way I like to do it. You know, I had a lot of days there. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, if it's going to be Zoom only, you know, I might have to look into some other kind of job, just because for me, the two things I love most about my job, guys, is I love getting to know sort of the players behind the stories. I love when you can connect with someone and really, you know, hear their experience and then hope to relay that to the fans. And then I love the energy of a building that's really going, like I was saying about the playoffs. And during the pandemic, we had no fans for a lot of those games. And I went to a ton of those games in the bubble, like something like 70 of them. And it just stripped my sort of the joy that I got from my job. And so, yeah, like, to me, the perfect is, and, you know, I don't be interested to hear from Riley's standpoint. I mean, I don't know what your relationship has been like with the media during your career, but like, I really like when you can sort of have a rapport with a player and he can sort of share with you what's going on, and you can start to see the world a little bit through his eyes as much as would ever be possible. And we're in an ideal world supposed to be a conduit, right? To tell these stories. And there's so many, you know, I listened to your Borowitzki episode there before coming on. Like, Borocop telling like you guys about, having that second incident. He broke some news on your pod about where he kicked the window in. Like, I love stuff like that. I mean, look, we're all, at the end of the day, we all put our pants on the same way. I mean, as I've gotten, I obviously grew up idolizing hockey players, but, through my career, I've gotten to know hockey players. And so I think it's just nice to almost try to humanize everybody. I think a lot of fans connect with that. And we got a lot of real people in the sport, even the guys making, an amount of money most of us average people couldn't imagine.
Yeah. I love that. I think you're so right. I was just talking to someone about, like, actually might have been like Casey Middlestad or someone, just about, like, for me, like, I've traveled around so much and played on so many different teams now. And you just start to understand that, like, your star players and these people that everyone idolizes, like, they're just humans, and like they struggled with other things just like everybody else struggles with. I think they just have a gift. They're able to play hockey and make some money doing it. So I love what you say. Like, where do you think the NHL, and like maybe how the NHL could like bring those stories out? Like, because hockey's nobody wants to talk about their own individual story or their own, because they think it's like boasting about themselves or it's taking away from that team mentality. But it almost like takes the league back. When you look at other leagues, you get a lot of guys that I feel like they do a good job at marketing themselves, and right way or wrong way, it helps their league and helps their marketing of their league. Do you see that in the NHL where it could improve, or do you find that like guys are a little bit hidden and it takes someone like you who has a relationship blossom to kind of get to know them and get their trust in order to bring those stories out?
Well, certainly selfishly, I wish there was more openness to it.
Yeah.
I mean, because obviously it would make my job easier. It might make it more interesting. I can recognize though why some players might be reluctant to put themselves out there in that way. The one thing that I've sort of reflected on is I can't actually imagine doing my job as publicly as you do. Obviously a little bit as a media person, you're somewhat public. I have a Twitter account, people yell at me on there, but but no one's paying money to watch me do my job, so that they don't feel that same right, I think, to maybe try to tear you down the way sometimes you must have to be a pro athlete. And so I can get why some people might want to be more private, but if we're just looking at it as an entertainment business, if we're speaking strictly high level, what's probably best for the sport, I think the more people are interested in talking about the sport, the better.
Yeah.
I've had some different experiences. Some teams are more open than others to sharing information or allowing you access to their players. I'm of the view, and again, I don't work for those teams. I think those teams, they're all thinking, how can we put our players in the best position to win a Stanley Cup? I mean, I think ultimately that's what they're doing. So if they make certain decisions, they must believe that too much exposure is bad, maybe for their brand or for, the mindset of their dressing room, what have you. But I'm definitely of the view that I think the more open and honest we could be, the better it is for the sport. And really at the end of the day, we actually all share that, I think, to some degree. I mean, it's just dollars and cents. I mean, if people are consuming media, presumably I'm going to be able to have a chance to make more money. If there's more people buying NHL tickets or merchandise, that the players get a bigger share of the pot, the owners do. I mean, really, we should actually all kind of be in it together, even though sometimes the relationship becomes maybe there's a bit of distrust there or what have you. But yeah, I'd love it if guys open up. And I actually see it a little bit in the younger players. I should say that. I mean, I think some of these guys that grew up with Instagram and stuff, like they seem more comfortable just putting whatever goofy shit with their dog out, or like stuff that I think fans can like though, and share that side of them themselves. Like I have found some of the younger players in the league are remarkably open about what's going on and what have you. And so, yeah, I think maybe we'll get there over time, but there's also there's a culture of the sport, right? I mean, it starts in the dressing rooms, even, at the levels you played at, Tyler, even honestly, in the minor hockey I played, and I didn't threaten at all to play at an elite level, but there's sort of a way that a hockey team functions. And I think it's sort of core to the sport. And, some of that is, not wanting to stand out too much, for good or for ill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because, like, even we bring on guys like, I mean, whether it be Jordan Eberle or whoever it may be, like, I mean, he's got a foundation. Like, I mean, it'd be so refreshing for I think fans to be able to like see an interview about obviously how the game went and this and that, but also like okay, like let's talk about your foundation. Like let's talk about something else. Like let's talk about the other purposes that you have in life besides, trying to get the puck in the net and win a Stanley
Right.
Cup. I mean, I really do find that, I mean, the conversations we've had at least so far, like have been very organic in the sense where it's like, okay, maybe these guys feel as though like sometimes they either can't talk about it or it's a case of they don't get asked about it. I don't know if that's the case either, but I mean, I even with our conversation with Emily Kaplan, like she was saying, like the younger players, it does seem like they have I don't think they feel more empowered to, share their story a little bit more, but she was even saying like it's much easier for them to be open with her in an interview situation or a scrum or whatever it may be. So I don't know what it is with that. I mean, you kind of said it with the Instagram, the social media and all that. And, but it is interesting to see that divide and to now like see even the mental health side of things and to see the way guys are going about that rather than maybe what they would have done 10 years ago.
Well, and let's put it on the journalist too. Like we don't always ask the most interesting questions. I'll put myself in that. Sometimes you get caught up in the games or what happens. I mean, the more I've reflected on it, I mean, obviously there's big games. If you're covering game 7 of a playoff series, okay, the decisions made or the mistakes made or the great plays made, I mean, you should focus on them. But if you're looking at the regular season, I mean, a lot of games are just games. I mean, sometimes it's just Tuesday night in November in St. Louis and whatever. I mean, like it's 3-2 for one of the teams. I think sometimes the journalists, maybe we should challenge ourselves to try to find out stuff. I mean, even that Boro went back and got his degree, to not to live in your last day, but like that sort of thing is interesting. And so, and again, I think it's relatable to fans, some of those things. And, I know that even when I go to a dinner party, I'm taking this in a different way. Like I love it when I run into people that don't really care about the NHL, because when someone, wants to corner me and talk about this, oh, what's going on with this team or what are you hearing about this? Like sometimes, work isn't your favorite thing. And so I would think as a player, maybe always being asked about your job isn't the best. And if you can find some of those passions that are outside of the rink, I mean, I think it's a better exchange for everyone. And there's probably paths to tell better stories out there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we even brought, sorry, Rouse, we brought Colby on, and Colby was one of the first guys that ever brought up. He was like, why don't we talk about the wives more? He's like, you know how much work they do, like they get no recognition. And even like something like that, it's funny because it's just never talked about. Like how much work these like hockey wives or these sports wives do put in to allow guys like, Colby and Riley to just do what they love. And I think it's just like, it's so valuable to have those conversations now. But I mean, it is kind of a case of, I'm sure they just kind of get browsed over, like that's something we can talk about later. Let's talk hockey. But anyways, Rouse, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned kind of like you enjoy talking about things outside of hockey, like your passions. Like what do you got going on? Like outside of doing your work with hockey, what do you find yourself interested in? I know Ty was saying, and I was doing a little reading, like your passion for running. You got anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, running's a big one for me. But not even just that. Like I like I'm really interested these days in like the economy and following what's going on. I mean, it's kind of a crazy time with inflation and all the decisions governments are making. I mean, when it comes to when I'm not working, like I don't really listen to hockey podcasts. I'm listening to podcasts about the financial world and reading articles on that. Mm-hmm. And then of course the other sports, as I say, that does take up. I'm not one to tell you like what's the good movie or what's the good Netflix series right now. I'm pretty much watching, if I have free time in my living room, I'm watching sports on TV. So, the other sports are a huge part of that, but I'm definitely interested sort of in the business world and investing and all that type of stuff. And so those are things, again, if I were to just meet you at a party, I'd love it if you were into that, or if you even worked in the investment world. Like it's the cool thing about my job is I get to meet a lot of people I would never guess to meet, being in Toronto too, where there's so much focus on hockey. And sometimes I get to know some of these people in the business world and I get to pick their brains. So those are, I would say, probably the main things that keep me interested outside away from the job. But, during the season, the job's pretty all consuming too. It's 6 days a week anyway, usually. And obviously nights and travel and the whole bit. But, those are the things I like. And yeah, running's been a big part of just sort of a daily routine for me. It's not necessarily something I like talk about with other people too much. It's more of a passion of something I do, but I love digging into what's going on in the financial world. And I wish I had some answers right now, because if you follow the markets or you follow currencies, I mean, everything's going crazy right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to read this quote. So when COVID hit, I found myself with a lot more time. I also found myself in a hard place around then. I was worried about what was going on in the world. I was worried about my family, health. I didn't know what was happening with my job at that point, or what the company would do. And as a way of giving myself a little bit purpose, I told myself I was going to run every day. This was at the beginning of COVID lockdowns when there was truly nothing to do. So I told myself that even if I didn't accomplish anything that day, I would still have done something positive for myself. That last line, I think, really sticks with me. And I think it should stick with a lot of people, just being able to do something positive for yourself. Up until COVID, I know that you were constantly on the road. I knew you were constantly, following around, trying to get stories, trying to, you were busy, exhausted. And so where did that thought process really start to stem from? Like, was it a case of you're sitting on the couch and you're completely with your own thoughts, and it just dawned on you that you need to start doing something positive for yourself each and every day? Like, how to talk about that process of getting to that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think the context is important. The way my job worked up until March of 2020, I basically went to every Maple Leafs game. I went to all the big league events. I mean, I was probably spending 180 days a year on the road, so traveling a ton and working a lot of long hours. And when you're that busy in a weird way, and it's a life that I'm really grateful to have had, and like, this is the job I've wanted since I was a kid. So I'm not complaining, but I was so busy, I wasn't thinking about anything really. I just was thinking about the next flight and the next assignment I had, what have you. And then all of a sudden it stops. Right. And the first week or two, I think we're all just trying to figure out what's going on. But, by a month into the COVID, I mean, I think, like a lot of people, I just had a lot of chance to worry about everything. I was worried about how long it would be before there'd be games again. Like, is my company just going to fire me? At the time I worked at Sportsnet, and I just had a contract. Like, I can't remember what the exact clause was, but they could just let me go and pay me a relatively small amount of money, not because it's my fault or their fault, but that's what was in the contract. So I was worried I might lose my ability to work. My mom died a few years ago. My dad lives alone, and I was worried about my dad, like, on his own. I was living in a pretty small condo in Toronto. Like, it was kind of almost just strange to be locked in the house. I mean, all those things kind of toppled on top of each other, Tyler. And I was not in a good place. What I've always tried to do, there's a few times in my life this has happened, but when something that I really didn't like happened, like something really bad, and going back to like university, I had a breakup that really upset me at the time, and I was young. I tried to think of, like, what's one good thing I can pull out of this? Like even though this is a shitty time and I'm not happy with what's happened and I don't control it, like, what can I control? And I've always tried to sort of find at least one thing I can do. And so about 10 years prior to the COVID, I used to be an avid runner. I did, 5 or 6 full marathons, probably 25 half marathons. It was something I used to love to do. And frankly, I just lost the commitment to it because I started traveling so much, and I just found it hard to keep up. And, you let things slip away sometimes in your life. Sometimes friendships slip away, not because you have a falling out with a friend, but you just, for whatever reason, it doesn't, you don't keep in touch. And so I thought, man, like, I really regret that I allowed myself to put on the weight I did, and that I stopped, looking after myself in that way and running. And so that's a long answer to tell you how I got to April 29th, 2020, which is the first day of I still have a run streak going. And so, at that time, I just had to tell myself, and I still say it sometimes, guys, like, if I'm out and it's like raining or it's crappy, or I'm jamming my running and I'm busy and I got a lot of things on my brain, I try to, like, slow my mind down in the middle of a run. I'm like, look, this is something you're doing for yourself. Like, it's great. You're getting fresh air today. Yeah, it might not be your fastest run or your farthest run, but, like, you're doing something for you that's going to, give you sort of compounding positive interest in your life. And I don't know why I had that moment of clarity in that really sort of crazy time, difficult time. But I just started running every day, and, I'm still going. I'm almost at 900 days since then.
Oh,
and
get this guy a contract in the NHL. My gosh.
No. But, it's, for me, the psychological benefits were by far the best. I mean, I did end up losing some weight, and I feel a lot better sitting here now than I did then physically. But, it's more that it gives me something to focus on in a busy life that I know will be good for me. Yeah. And it's a place where I find peace. I mean, I almost meditate when I'm out running. Like sometimes I'll run for an hour and like not have a conscious thought. Like I just kind of go and lose myself in whatever I am. Other times I'm engaged in a podcast and I feel like I'm talking with my friends, even though I'm not saying anything out loud. Like listening to you guys with Boro yesterday actually was on my run. So, you know, I don't know exactly where the vision came from other than to say, I have a few times in my life I can point to difficult moments. And the one thing I thought is, okay, what is one good thing I can do in this crappy time? And that was, Tyler, like it was such a great decision for me.
Yeah.
And even just for my health, like now, you know, through that period, I sort of had a chance to go like, you know what? I don't want to travel 180 days a year. And so I've changed some of the aspects of my jobs. I've switched, you know, to different roles where I don't have to go and follow one team around all the time. And, you know, I don't want to die on my keyboard at 44, not to be morose, but it's, you know, it's a grind being on the road and that much. And, you know, we don't fly private and we have to fly the next morning after games instead of that night. And it's a lot of time away. And so I made a whole series of changes in my life in these last couple of years. And it really, a lot of it starts with that first decision, just to start, you know, doing something to calm my brain down and get back in shape.
That's amazing. 900 days. I can't get over that. I can probably count on one hand, maybe two hands, the amount of runs I've went on. And that's probably only like a 3 kilometer run that I had to do in high school gym class or something.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not throwing barbells around in the gym too often. And I'm sure you've done a lot of that over the last 20 years of your life. So, I mean, I think everyone likes different things, right? I mean, like, I'm not telling anyone else. Like, I always make this clear. Like, everyone's like, aren't you injured or whatever? I was like, I'm not. And I don't know why, but it just works for me. And, you know, I think that the key takeaway shouldn't be, hey, I should start running every day. It should be trying to find some small things you can do to, for me, it's maybe just the way my brain works. Like, because I've always sort of been an achiever in my life. Like I got good grades in school, and like I always kind of, you know, that can be a negative thing too. And I think for me, it became a negative thing. Like sometimes if I feel like something's off in my life, like it feels like everything's ruined. It's hard to explain. I don't really know a better way to describe it than that. But like, and in that COVID time, I just felt like, oh my God, like everything is a disaster. And so I just try to focus on one good thing I could do. And I, you know, for me, there's a lot of power in that idea. And honestly, I can't even imagine. I mean, I didn't really set out with any number of days in mind, or, you know, I did a full marathon on my 365th day. And what was cool about that is I actually ran that 13 minutes quicker than my previous best. But the previous best had been like 12 years before. Like, if you would have told me when COVID happened, and you know, for anyone who doesn't follow running, you don't get faster as you get older, basically. I mean, it's, you know, your body doesn't allow that to happen usually to a certain point. But if you'd have told me when COVID happened, like, not only will you run again, you're going to run a marathon faster than you did in 2009. I never, ever, like, that would have been something I told you would just be impossible. Like, I just was so far from the person physically, mentally from 2009 to 2020. But, you know, because I started doing this, like I managed that. And what's crazy is I'm big on goal setting. And about 5 years before, I'd written down some goals. And one of them was, you're going to run a marathon faster than the time I'd done in 2009. And like, I'd forgotten about it. And somehow, I don't know, I think there's some magic sometimes in writing down goals. I can't explain it better, but literally everything on that list I wrote happened, even the one that I thought was impossible. So, you know, that's awesome. Again, I don't even know the point of the story other than I'm just sharing my experience. And like,
wow.
I think it's important though to like highlight like what you said about like finding what works for you, because I think so many people like see, especially with like social media and just being able to access other people's lives so easily, you always see what works for other people, and then you just automatically assume that it's going to work for you, whether it's like diets, whether it's like even in like hockey, like you see people change their games because they see someone else playing a certain way, or change their curve because someone else uses a curve. But it's like, there's so many things that just like, it's just what works for you. I find like I see my teammates like loading up pasta before a game and eating pasta, and I try to do that, and I'm sleeping when the game starts. But like just little things like that, and knowing your body, I think, is a really big one. Like even working out, like if I try to go lift weights and tons of, like, I won't be able to move on the ice, but I love doing it, but I just have to remember that like it doesn't make me feel good. So like let's do something else. So I think it's important to highlight that. So I love that how you brought that up.
Yeah, well, a lot of people want the prescription, right? I'm sure you get asked by either hockey parents or maybe young, like, how do I make the NHL? And the truth is like, look at the number. Like, there's so many different stories. I mean, some guys were the best players their whole life and they just make it. Some guys almost quit the game. Some guys probably have quit the game and somehow got back into it. And like, some guys spend a lot of time in the American Hockey League, others don't. I mean, there's not one way, and there's certainly not one way in my industry. And really, I think the truth is there's just not one way to do anything. We're all kind of snowflakes. I know we don't believe that. We're all a little different. We all have different, life experiences. We have different strengths and weaknesses. Like there's not one way to achieve anything other than I think being gritty as a mindset is incredibly valuable. If you can just keep at it through bad times, through bad days, through maybe coaches that give you bad, poor feedback, bosses, might lose a job along the way. I mean, basically anyone you see that you think is successful has probably had overcome some challenges along the way. And so I think that if there's one broad stroke, I'd say you just got to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it and almost be stubborn about it. But there's certainly not one path to do anything.
Yeah.
I don't want to assume anything, but I think it's an understatement to say that your perspective has changed over the last kind of 5 or 6 years. And I'm always like, I find it interesting to obviously talk about people that have gone through grief. And I'm not saying we have to get into this too much, but I mean, just with experiencing grief and that perspective that comes along with grief, how were you able to not rework your brain, but how were you able to be gritty through? I mean, I'm not saying that every day was a case of, okay, I'm going to be gritty today. I'm going to get up and run and do all this. But I mean, going through grief and trauma and just in general, I mean, how was it you were able to continue to be gritty in the long run and just try and find that new perspective and to just, going through something like this, like how does that, when you look back and reflect, how does that change you?
Well, if I'm going to be honest, I haven't always been good at it. My mom died 6 years ago and she was still in the meat of her life. Like she was still working and had become a grandparent for the first time. And she got brain cancer, and died within 3 months. And, as I look back on it now, I don't think I handled that very well. Like I went straight back to work. I think like I allowed myself to get busy in the details of my life again, because I mean, it almost happened so fast. I mean, I don't even know, because I haven't gone through someone that close to me dying in I'll say a longer, more drawn out way, maybe a disease that lasts a couple of years. Like it was almost like before I could figure out what was happening, it was over. And so, I think, Tyler, in a lot of ways that I've still had to sort of work through that even during the pandemic times, like kind of dealing with that, knowing what I know now, I probably should have just went to therapy or something. It sounds strange. It just didn't even occur to me. I just don't operate in a friend circle, or I just haven't been around people that have talked openly about doing that. And I didn't think about it. But like when you talk about grief, I actually, I don't want to present here like I have everything figured out, because I really feel when I look back on that time in my life where my mom got sick and it's quite traumatic for our family, of course, and you sort of doing what you can in the moment. But then I feel like I sort of just pushed it aside and thought I was okay. And really I wasn't. And quite honestly, times now when I hear of like a close friend or colleague, maybe who loses a parent, I usually try to send a text message or have a conversation and just say like, I don't think I dealt with this very well when I went through it. So, basically trying to encourage them to take time to do with grieving. And so, I don't have an answer on how best to do that. You've dealt with far more traumatic circumstance, of course, with what happened with your teammates in Humboldt. But grief is something I do think about a lot because it's hard. And I think now I'm in a better spot. I think I've had to face some some parts of myself, probably through all of this. Like, I think it's all kind of mixed together, right? We can't really compartmentalize our lives, right? Like, on one hand, I'm a son and I'm a partner, and I'm an employee, I'm a hockey journalist. You're all these different things to different people, a best friend, a brother, an uncle. We all serve these roles, but everything kind of gets blended together. And it's, I think, it wasn't probably the intention of your question, but like, for me, when you say that word grief, like, I still think I'm 40 years old. I'm still learning how to basically manage that kind of thing. Like, if or when it happens again and touches my life in that way, I hope I will deal with it a little bit better, because I think it's easy. I think sometimes it's easy to try to distract yourself and push stuff down, but inevitably it comes back to the surface in some way, shape, or form.
Do you think there's any part of like the sport culture that you've obviously been around your whole life? Like, do you think in some way like that rubs off on it too? Like, maybe your first experience with that, like not first experience, but like a very big experience with that, where you've like, it's just like ingrained, I feel like, in athletics, where it's just like put your head down, battle through it, and then everything will be okay. Like, do you feel like maybe that was something that rubbed off on you when you were dealing with that?
I haven't thought of it from that perspective, but probably.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something, it's something we kind of celebrate in our sport in particular, right? I mean, whether it's the playoffs and you see guys blocking shots and skating around with a broken leg, and everyone's like, oh, that's amazing, or whatever. I mean, it's something that is celebrated. The thing that at the time I remember thinking is like, it's normal, right? I mean, you're supposed to outlive your parents. It's when it goes the other way, that's something that's really difficult on a family. I guess I just thought it would, I don't know why still, I mean, obviously I love my mom deeply, but I don't know why it affected me to the degree it did, or for so long. Like, I actually still don't really have an answer to that. I think maybe it just, you kind of construct the world, right? At least this is how my brain works. And like, you have foundational pieces. And I just think like a huge part of my foundation changed really quickly.
Yeah.
And I just thought I could go back to doing everything else other than that, and it would be fine. And it wasn't for me. And so probably, it might be some of the sport thing. I mean, I hope that's something that's changing, like that's the cool thing is, I mean, I know I've talked about Borrow 10 times already, but like he's a tough guy in hockey too, right? And he's been pretty open with his experiences, and we've seen more and more players, speak openly about, if they've had some addiction problems or things that have cropped up in their life. I think we're in a safer place, certainly than we were 10 years ago, where this stuff is starting to be discussed, and hopefully the message will be, to anyone out there, whether they play the sport or not, that it's okay to seek help in cases when you need it, because I don't think any of us is individually equipped to deal with everything that you're going to experience over a long life. Like, let's face it, everybody's gone through some shit at some times. And, I think that hopefully if there's one part of hockey that I would like to see changed, is maybe that there's more acknowledgement of that and more acceptance of that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of been sitting on this, but I find it very interesting, because even for me, like the accident happened April 6, 2018. I got home from the hospital on April 20th, and I think I went back to work on like June 5th. Like I align with that very much, because I almost think it was just a case of, I felt as though I'm not contributing to society. And like what I went through obviously is, very traumatic and has changed so many lives. But I almost think it's a case of, I was so good at staying distracted rather than, keeping busy. I think it was a case of, I just wanted to completely distract, and like having these meaningless conversations with these people where it's like, hey, how you doing? I'm doing well, like, thanks for checking up. Like, I'm good, like, and I just like, now I can reflect back and be like, why did I go to work? Like, I mean, what was the point of that? Like, I didn't even give myself one chance to even accept like what was going on, or try and embrace it in any case. But this kind of leads to my next question. You talk about if family, friends, or somebody around you loses a parent, or somebody's going through grief, and you have these conversations, and you reach out and try and encourage them to go along that path of really taking care of their grief. And do you find these conversations therapeutic for you? Like, how do you, I mean, I think for me, I've had to learn to step it back a little bit and not get too invested in other, situations of trauma or grief, because, you know, I'm still dealing with it. You're still dealing with it. It's going to be a forever thing. I mean, it's going to be a thing that we both think about every day for the rest of our lives. But I mean, at times I really do find it beneficial for me to, you know, hold some compassion for some other people that have stories and have, whether it's grief, whether it's trauma, whether it's minor little things. I do really find it therapeutic to have those conversations and like really be able to understand and embrace what they're going through and acknowledge that as well, and think about, okay, like this works for them, maybe I can try and input into my life and my grief journey. You know, how does that work for you?
Well, let me tell you the positive side of this thing, because I've sort of focused on the negative part. Is I was actually blown away at that period of time, like how many people reached out and made contact with me. Like I'm talking like, say, GMs, like guys I didn't really deal with or know personally. I mean, Victor Hedman at the time reached out. I was just like blown away. Like just like a guy, you know, in Victor's case, he plays in Tampa. I dealt with him a few times professionally, but like that he would bother. He was, you know, and he was a young guy then. Like he's not, you know, this was 6-7 years ago. I mean, and all kinds of people, not just like, I actually felt like a big group hug too from obviously your really close family and friends, but even like the wider hockey community at large, you know, that people took time out of their day to send a note or make a phone call or what have you. And so the one thing that I've taken from that, Tyler, is not so much that I find it therapeutic or that I need to get involved in anyone else's situation, but I think that I can share at least a little bit of perspective with someone. And, you know, for me, those notes actually meant a lot in the moment. Like I didn't expect that, right? Like you go through this, like, it's like, you don't even know what to think before. It's like anything that you haven't experienced. It's a major life event. You don't really know what you don't know, but you know, it's this huge thing. But I just couldn't believe how many people bothered. And then I actually thought, you know, what made me think back is I was like, oh man, like how many people have like lost a parent and I've never acknowledged it. I was just too busy with my Tuesday or whatever was going on. And so, you know, I just try to make a point now, if I ever hear of anyone that I know well enough, to just send a quick note. And, you know, as I say, usually my message is just more like, don't feel like you have to just go back to work or that you have to rush past this, like that, you know, just take it from my experience. I think I tried to do that and I didn't deal with it very well. And so, yeah, I hope that kind of gets.
No, that's perfect.
So
yeah.
I don't like have to like pick up the phone and get all in your business and hear every detail. You know, I'm not pretending to be a psychologist, but I think it's more recognizing the value I got from the number of people that reached out, and then just trying to give a little piece of advice that might help someone else avoid maybe some of the holes I stepped in.
Well, yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's it is very refreshing to be able to receive those messages and know that, you know, somebody is thinking about you in a very difficult time. And I think that's obviously why I value our relationship so much. I mean, it's not like we talk every day, but even the first time we met in Las Vegas, watching the Stanley Cup be awarded and having a couple Crosbys after, I think it was just very organic, and it's just very natural. That
having a couple Crosbys.
Oh, you've never had a Crosby?
No.
I don't know how much of this story you want told, Tyler, but it's one of the coolest nights of my life, actually.
Oh, yeah, do it. Just tell it all.
Well, you know, it was during the Cup final, Vegas, Washington, right? Was that 2018? Was that right after your accident, really? A couple months?
Yeah, it would have been in end of June, yeah.
And I don't want you to tell the story about the Crosbys, but I think that was your team drink, right?
Not like overly, like I think I can't remember how Crosby's came about, but we were drinking vodka Gatorades, and of course we're in the hotel room in Vegas, and I think Colby and Mel ordered the Gatorades, and it was like $15 for a Gatorade, and we're just deleting vodka Gatorades.
Yeah, it was just to get to know you and some of your teammates that were there at the time, and have a few drinks. And I remember Colby was FaceTiming some people, and we were all probably not. We'd all been overserved a little bit, but it was a lot of fun. I think, did we get Ron McLean on that night? I think Biz Nasty we might have got that night. I think he tried. I think he tried Sid, but Sid was in Germany or something.
Yeah, anyway. We're trying everybody.
It was a wild night getting to know some of the Broncos.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyways, let's throw it even to. I want to even just read. I texted Ron. I know you guys both had a really good relationship, and obviously you're not with Sportsnet anymore, but I know, Ron just delivers. Like I texted Ron and I was like, hey Ron, like we're bringing CJ on, and I kid you not, he writes me an article. Talking about hometown hockey in Coburg, talking about you voicing the show opening. Justin Williams, Mr. Game 7 is from there, and former Oiler D-man Steve Smith, who had that own goal in 1986. And I mean, he just went on and on and on. And he pretty much just ended it with, obviously, wonderful journalist with a keen eye and measured voice, helping to grow our ethics. Having a relationship with a guy like that, and even I want to talk about like Hockey Night in Canada. There was a quote about Hockey Night in Canada. I mean, you did 4 seasons of it, but there's a healthy level of anxiety that goes along with it as well. And I think just being a kid that grew up on Hockey Night in Canada, Riles did it as well. I mean, you did it as well. I mean, talk about that first Hockey Night in Canada. Do you even remember anything? Were you so caught up in the moment? Just talk about that night.
Oh my God. It was crazy. I mean, so I wanted to be a hockey journalist, right? And my idea at that time, like we used to get the Toronto Star at my house as a kid, and that would be at the table at breakfast, and I would just read the sports section. And so I always thought of myself, of course, just being a hockey writer, and I got to do that pretty young. But I never thought, hey, I should be on TV or I want to be on TV. And so I would say by the time I worked my way to Hockey Night in Canada, my dream didn't go that far. I hadn't ever imagined that would be something that would happen to me, where I'd be sitting on a camera, literally sitting beside Ron MacLean. I actually remember the first show, Ron introduced me as being from Coburg. And I talk about Coburg a lot. It's a small town. Most people that are from my part of the world don't even know where it is. I mean, if you live in Toronto, unless you've been on the Via train or something and stuff.
I had to look it up. I'm from St. Catharines, and I had to look.
There you go. I mean, and you shouldn't. And the truth is, you should know where it is, because there's probably small towns around St. Catharines I've never heard of.
Right.
But there's a lot of pride for people back there that Ron MacLean introduced me as being from Coburg. And I remember very well, I was freaked out. I was honestly freaked out, might be overstating it, but I was nervous. I mean, for 4 seasons, I think we did something like 30 shows or more. I probably did it 150 times. I was probably freaked out 100 of them. Because, there's a lot of people watching, and I think it's easy to overthink it, right? I mean, the truth is, whether you're, I'm speaking into a camera right now, is that any different fundamentally than doing it on Hockey Night in Canada? It probably shouldn't be. But your mind is something you have to kind of tame, but for me, I think it was a good anxiety, Tyler. Honestly, you have to do things that make yourself nervous too. It's it can't all be just a comfortable life. You have to push yourself. And so, I don't want to at all project that as negative thing, but I never got totally comfortable there. It still feels like it didn't happen. It feels like that's someone else's life, or, even that I get paid to go to NHL games. I still can't put my brain around it. Obviously you just do it, but then every once in a while you step back, and it's when I was a kid, I got to 3 NHL games because tickets were expensive. It was hard to get them. I only ever got to go to 3 games as a kid, and I just loved hockey. And I've probably been to over 1,000 now. That I've been to the last 16 Stanley Cup Finals. I was there when Crosby scored the golden goal. I was in Sochi for that Olympics. I've had a career. I've had experiences that young me could never have imagined, and yet it still kind of feels a little surreal. And so if I look at Hockey Night in Canada, that's probably right at the top of it. We had a hometown hockey in Coburg actually not long before the pandemic. It's probably maybe my career highlight actually is Ron MacLean coming to my hometown. The essay he's talking about, I basically had to write a 2-minute essay and I voiced it, and they, covered it with scenes in my hometown. Obviously there's a lot of pride in that for me. They actually had me there signing autographs, which is almost comical. It's actually insane. Literally high school teachers I hadn't seen since high school coming up together. I mean, but it's not so much that I felt famous. It's more just feeling a pride, and my whole family came, my dad still lives in Coburg, but my siblings all live elsewhere, but everyone came back for that event, and just was a really cool, memorable time in January 2020. And I'm glad I got to experience that. And Ron played a huge part of that. That's the other thing. Ron blows you away. Actually that night on the broadcast, he brought up my mom and knew her name. And I don't even know how he knew that. I remember almost wanting to cry on TV because I couldn't believe, he just surprised me. He does a good job of knowing everything about everyone, but not letting it on until he gets you on camera or something. So, working with Ron was great, and Elliot and Nick Kiprios when Nick was still there. But yeah, that was probably a career highlight. I'm not sure if I'll ever top that one, Tyler. I kind of feel hey, I got on there. I don't even think I deserved it or whatever, but somehow I got there. hey, I'm not the kid from Coburg who screwed up.
What? So here, Ty, this could be a question for you. Is there anything about Hockey Night in Canada that sticks out to you, even from, well, probably better from watching it growing up, that you remember, like certain moment in Hockey Night in Canada, like specifically? I was like, for me, like I just remember like the theme song, obviously, and it was always Saturday Night Leaf game, and I was like a diehard Leaf fan when like Matt Sundin, Gary Roberts, Darcy Tucker, like that era, McGillney. But like I was young and I'd always get sent to bed usually after the first or something. And I just remember laying at the top of my stairway. Like I'd be upstairs, but I could still see the TV through like the railing, you know?
Yeah.
My dad would be sitting there. He'd always pull his lazy boy chair out right in front of the TV and he'd be watching the game. And I would be like watching it over his shoulder from like way back. And that's it. I just would bring my blanket out there. I'd lay there. And I think he knew I was there probably every time, but I thought I was just being sneaky. And just for some reason, watching the game from that spot, listening to that theme song. And usually it was like Don Cherry talking about something totally irrelevant from the game, but just had me totally like enthralled, you know? I don't know. It just sticks out so vividly in my mind. I don't know if you guys had any other experience like that.
Me too. Like I had our television in our living room was kind of up high and there was a baseboard below and I'd sit there with a mini stick and just shoot the ball against the wall while watching the game. And I didn't miss very many Saturdays. And you know, it's funny. Like the first time I met Ron, I don't even think I told Ron this, but if you remember the year the Leafs played the Hurricanes in the third round, I'm trying to remember what year that was, 2002, I think. And
was that when Carolina won?
Yeah, Carolina won, and they finished the series off Game 6 in Toronto. And I'd come to Ryerson University downtown Toronto at that point. So I was just a student. And in Game 6, Matt Sundin actually tied it in the last minute or two, and then the Leafs lost in overtime. And I actually went and stood outside the media gate after the game. Because I actually used to always do this. I used to go in university and just stand by the media gate and watch the media guys go in and out and women, and just like imagine myself being there. But that night I remember going and standing after the game by there and watching everyone come out. And then Ron came out and I introduced myself. And so that was the first time I ever met Ron, was just like being a loser, stalking the media gate. But I mean, it sounds weird. It was just like visualization for me. Like I always just wanted to be someone who could walk through that door, like have the ability to, you know, the idea to go to games. I actually snuck into the arena once too. So around that time, which I don't know, I'm not going to advocate anyone do that. I'm not sure if it's still possible to do it, but during a playoff game, I actually snuck into the building at the first intermission, through a door where people were smoking. Cause I just wanted to be at the games. I just wanted to be part of it. And yeah, so Hockey Night and all that stuff, man, like that's why it was so weird to ever just get there again. Like I don't think it probably holds the same place. Like society's changed, you know, people are not even watching live sports like young kids, I think, are just watching highlights on YouTube and what have you. But that was a real big part of my childhood. And so to get to experience part of it is, like, as I said, like that's the dream didn't go that far. So I don't even know how that happened. If you ever find out, let me know.
even the first time I met Ron, it was the night in Vegas. They brought us down to do the just like game side. So where I think it was kind of where Vegas came out. It was in the one corner, and they brought me and one of the other boys down to do a quick little interview with Ron and Don before the game. And I shit you not, man, like I couldn't even hear myself think. And Ron, like this was the moment where I was like, this guy's like literally a robot, like in the best way possible. Cause like he was just like so in tune to the conversation. And I'm like trying to hear, I think at one point during the interview, I was like, what'd you just say? And like the game is like about to start, like James Neal like comes by, gives us a high five. And like, I'm like, what is going on right now? Like Don gets brought in and then Ron just like instant does his thing and then just goes off. And it's just like it was unbelievable. And at this point, like I didn't really have like, obviously I grew up watching Hockey Night in Canada. I knew of Ron, I knew of Don, I knew of all that. But I mean, at this point, it was just like, oh my gosh, like this is it. And then I want to touch on one more thing in his text. Is it called Cucina Urbana?
Oh, wow.
So so we did hometown hockey in Leduc.
How does he remember that? That's a restaurant in Coburg that he must.
I know. Okay, so this is the best part. Okay, so he was saying we did hometown hockey in Leduc. I think it was in 2019, and there's a place in Leduc called Barney's, and it's got a beer wall. And at this time, I think it was one of the only beer walls in like North America. And so we went to Barney's, and it was Ron, Tara, it was me, my family, and Ron is just enthralled with this beer wall. He's like, I get to pour my own beers. And so he like instantly brought that up because I think that same place has that beer wall as well, right?
Wow. I'm like, do you guys remember where you ate lunch last week? Like, how does Ron remember going to one restaurant in Coburg? Like, that's
it's mind blowing.
Yeah, so it does have, yeah, it's funny. I'm actually going there on Friday night. I'm going back for Thanksgiving weekend, Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, and I'm going to be at Cucina Urbana on Friday. So hopefully they appreciate the free shout out.
All right, CJ. Well, I mean, we've talked about everything. Let's do one last question. Like, I know this isn't going to be about hockey. This is going to be about sports. You get a dream sporting event that you are able to go to. Like, is there one sporting event, whether it's college football, whether it's, the All Blacks in New Zealand, like, is there one sporting event where you were like, this is it, like, this is the Mount Everest?
For me, it's probably the British Open at St. Andrews, which is a shame because it was just there last year and I didn't manage to get there. But I don't know if you've been to St. Andrews. It's such a cool little town. There's just something so charming about it. My dad grew up in Scotland, so maybe I feel some sort of ancestral pull. I'm not sure what it is. And I just think the British Open for me is, I love the Masters, and I got to go to Augusta a couple times for work. But for me, if there's just one thing I could do, it's probably go cover a British Open, or even just go attend a British Open at St. Andrews and go to the Dunvegan Hotel, which is just like not even a 9-iron off the 18th green, a great place to go people watch and have a beer afterwards. So that's my dream. And I think it'll be 4 or 5 years. It's there. I'm going to find my way to get there. Let's do it, CJ. I'm coming. Love it. You're welcome. You're welcome, buddy. We're going to have a look. Although if you come, we might have a few Crosbys and it could get really wild. So. Yeah. We'll have to take Colby along for that one too then. Oh man. All right. We need Mel too to keep us in line. Yeah. Riles, you got anything else?
No, that was great. I appreciate it. That was a good convo. It was awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I love your pod. It's a unique voice. I think it's doing something important in the space. Well, CJ, I love you. I appreciate you. I hope to see you hopefully sometime this season. But yeah, truly, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks, guys.